He was shagging his son's ex-girlfriend, right? And he died while doing it.
From the Newsroom at news.com.au.
Riley Knight is the host of a very popular podcast called Half-Arsed History. Since 2018, he has released more than 300 episodes highlighting absurd and entertaining stories from the past. He's turned some of those stories into a book called History's Strangest Deaths. It is out now. He joins me now. G'day, Riley.
G'day, mate. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on, because this is such a cracker of a book. You write about 50 different deaths, some funny, some shocking, some truly unbelievable. I've picked a handful of my favourites, and I'm hoping that you can just tell everyone what happened. Is that okay?
Yeah, mate, let's get into it. Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
All right, let's start with a fella known as Jarl Sigurd the Mighty. Apologies if I got that wrong. He died after being bitten by a severed head. Tell everyone what happened.
Yeah, so really interesting story behind this one. It's not often that a bloke that you kill then goes on to kill you from beyond the grave. But Jarl Sigurd, he was a Viking, and he was doing what Vikings do best. He's raiding and reaving and pillaging across what is today the coast of northern Scotland. Anyway, a local warlord named Maelbrigta the Bucktooth challenged him, right? Challenged him in his own. He said, "Listen, mate, we don't like you around here. We don't like what you're doing. We're gonna boot you out of here, and we're gonna do it by force of arms." Anyway, Jarl Sigurd wipes the floor with this bloke, captures Maelbrigta as his prisoner, lops his head off, right, and then rides off into the sunset. Another day's reaving and pillaging. Well done. He straps the severed head of this bloke, again, Maelbrigta the Buck-toothed, to his saddle as like a grisly trophy. Take it back to his Viking mates. Oh, look what I got up to today. Anyway, apparently the head is bouncing along on the side of his saddle, and the buck teeth of this severed head lacerate this bloke's leg, right? Which, of course, these days, you both go down the doctor, you get your antibiotics, and you're all good to go. But an infected wound back then, that could be a death sentence. And it was for Jarl Sigurd. His leg got so badly infected that he died of the wound. He was killed by someone that he beheaded.
That is I mean, it's the ultimate case of revenge from beyond the grave, really, isn't it?
There are so many different ways to die in battle. It's not very often that you die like that after the battle, from an infected wound that someone that you killed gave you.
Another standout story in the book is about an American lawyer named Clement Vallandigham. He died in the 1870s. I love this one. Tell everyone what happened.
Yeah, so this bloke, he was an interesting fella. On the wrong side of history for most of his career. He was an ardent supporter of the rebel Confederates and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, in his later years, he worked as a lawyer, right? And one day he's got to get his client off a murder charge. This bloke has been charged with shooting someone in the guts during a barroom brawl. Now, Clement, he comes up with a rather novel defence for this bloke who's been accused. He said, no. My client didn't shoot him in the guts. This bloke shot himself in the guts accidentally while he was trying to pull his own pistol out of his pocket, right?
Of course.
Well, that doesn't sound like it could actually happen. Well, Clement goes, well, before you get too carried away here, let me demonstrate for you how this could have happened. So he puts a pistol in his pocket, right? And he makes this big show of sort of fumbling it as he's pulling it out. And he didn't realise the pistol was loaded.
Oh.
So as he's pulling it out and fumbling away with it, it went off. He shot himself in the guts, and he died. So he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was possible to kill yourself in this way. And if you'll believe it, this defence worked. When it was taken to the courtroom, the remaining defence team for this bloke was on the murder charge. They said, well, look, Your Honour, we've tested this, and look, it could have happened. Here's the corpse to prove it.
Undeniable proof. Wow. I mean, that's a defence you can really only do once, isn't it? Shooting yourself and dying for your client.
An exceptional level of dedication to his craft. That's the sort of lawyer you want on your side. Someone who's going to put not just his name, but his body on the line for you.
There is a cracking story about a man named Hans Steininger. Again, don't know if I got the name right. He died in the year 1567 due to his facial hair. This is bonkers. Tell us how it happened.
Yeah, so this bloke, Hans Steininger, he was the burgomaster, the mayor, essentially, of a little town called Braunau am Inn. Some of you may have heard of this town, Braunau am Inn. Hans Steininger is the, probably I would say, the second most famous facial hair bearing man to come from it. There was another rather unfortunately iconic piece of facial hair to emerge from Brunner in and around, when was it, the 1930s or 40s perhaps? Anyway, this fella, right, much better bloke than Hitler, not that that's a very high bar to clear.
Yeah.
He was by all accounts a dedicated public servant, a very popular leader in this town as a mayor, dedicated to the service of his people, so much so that one night, right, when he's lying in bed, he hears the alarm of fire go up throughout the town. So he, again, being a diligent public servant, he rushes out of bed to go and give aid. Except this bloke, again, famous for his facial hair, he had a magnificent 2-metre long beard. This thing was the pride and joy, not just of him, but the town. People loved seeing this bloke strutting around with this massive beard. He used to roll it up and keep it in like a little sort of satchel thing, like a little pocket, right, on his belt. Anyway, one night, as I say, the fire alarm goes... fire alarm. he needs to change the 9-volt battery in the 19th century. The alarm of fire goes up. He gets out of bed, races down the stairs, but doesn't tuck his beard away in time. This man's magnificent facial hair was his undoing. He got entangled, tripped up in the beard, fell down the stairs, broke his neck, and that was that for poor old Hans Steininger. However, while he was dead and buried and obviously laid to rest in a cemetery somewhere, his beard was shorn off and today is proudly displayed at the local history museum in Braunau am Inn. You would imagine that the local history museum is looking for anything at all to put in their displays that doesn't involve some other elements of the history.
What an amazing story. You don't see on too many coroner's reports death by beard. That is pretty remarkable. Let's move on to, one of the more gruesome deaths in the book. There's a few of them. There was a guy called St. Lawrence who died back in the year 258 Common Era. Tell us what happened to him.
Yeah, very early Christian saint, this bloke. So 3rd century CE, obviously a point where Christianity was establishing itself. It wasn't the massive, huge global world religion that it is today. So much so that many Christians were persecuted by the government in Rome at the time. And St. Lawrence, he was a deacon or an archdeacon, I believe. He was an ally of the Pope at the time, right? In any case, he was pretty high up in the early Christian church. And when the Roman government came down on Christians, as they sometimes did, he was one of the blokes who was ultimately put to death. Right, he was martyred for his faith. But today, St. Lawrence is remembered as being the patron saint in the Catholic faith, at least, of cooks and comedians. And this has a lot to do with the way that he died, because St. Lawrence was roasted alive, the poor bloke, which again is a very, very nasty way to go. Right, it's not the sort of way you want to shuffle off this mortal coil, but the story goes that as Sir Lawrence, he was sort of strapped to this grill that was then rotated, so he was, cooked through, if you want to put it in those terms. And as this was happening, right, as he was being cooked alive on one side, he apparently said to the blokes who were roasting him, he said, "Turn me over. I'm done on this side." And so this zinger that he left this world with resulted him in being, again, not just the patron saint of cooks, given that he was cooked alive, but also of comedians, given that somehow he managed to pull this one-liner out of absolutely nowhere while being roasted alive. Incredible.
There is a story in history's Strangest Deaths about an Aussie politician named Sir Billy Snedden. Now, I'll be honest, I had never heard of this guy, and I certainly hadn't heard of the unique way he died. To be honest, it's probably how I want to go. He died in the late 80s. Tell everyone what happened, Riley.
Certainly a better way to go than poor old St. Lawrence, for sure, although it is one that's going to make a fair few headlines. I'm sure some older listeners will remember this bloke, Sir Billy Snedden. He was the leader of the opposition for a while, Speaker of the House. Obviously, when he retired from Parliament, he obviously hadn't had enough. He wasn't sick of being around loud, entitled rich people, so after he retired from Parliament, he became the president of the Melbourne Football Club. But the way that he died, it made some headlines back in the days, and as I say, I'm sure some people remember. He had apparently a bit of a thing for, shall we say, extracurricular activities when it came to his liaisons with women. And he was caught I think it was the day of or even the day after the campaign launch for Little Johnny Howard, right, all those years ago when he was leader of the Liberal Party. He was found in a hotel room in delicto flagrante with his son's ex. He was shagging his son's ex-girlfriend, right? And he died while doing it.
He died on the
He
job.
died. He died, and this was the headline on in the papers the next day. Snedden dies on the job, is what they all said. And look, I'll try to phrase this as delicately as possible here, but it does seem that he and his, he at least had, they had sort of reached the conclusion of their amorous entanglement, at least in his part, I would say. So, as I say in the book, it's fair to say that that Sir Billy Snedden, he was coming while he was going.
I think that should be the headline of this podcast. That's what we'll call it. The last one I want to ask you about from the book. This is like something from a Final Destination movie. It is so bizarre. It's about a poodle named Kachi. I think that's how you pronounce it. He was responsible not for one, but for multiple deaths in the 1980s. Please explain.
Yeah, so this story was one that I had to really track down. I had to dig into the crates for this one. It happened in Argentina. So all of the news reports that covered this extraordinary circumstance, they're all in Spanish. So I'm running it through translators, that sort of stuff, trying to piece this story together. But all of the sources that reported on this agreed. This poodle, for unknown reasons, it threw itself off the 13th floor of a Buenos Aires apartment building one day. And very sadly, right, it landed on an old lady who was walking underneath the building. Now, this killed her instantly. The dog also obviously didn't survive its very brief career as a canine skydiver. But it didn't stop there, because obviously this pooch falls out of the sky, kills this old woman. People rush over, right, to try to help her, make sure she's okay, see if she's okay, see if she could be helped, whatever else. And in one woman's haste to run over and lend assistance, she ran into the road and got cleaned up by a bus.
No.
And then, on top of this, another bloke who has just watched a poodle fall out of the sky, kill an old lady, and then another woman get hit by a bus. This is too much for him. He has a heart attack, and he dies as well. So this poodle falling off of this building killed 3 people in one go, just like that. I don't know what the poodle was trying to achieve in doing this. I don't know if it was attempting to take as many people out with it as it went, but that's what happened.
Riley, you've told so many incredible stories like this over the years. What got you hooked on history in the first place all those years ago?
Oh, look, it's something that probably goes back to being a kid. Like, I used to love ancient stories of myths and legends and all of that sort of stuff. And I had teachers in primary school that would tell us these stories and got me really interested, not just in myths and legends from ancient times, but also, the way people lived and what life was like back in thousands, hundreds of years ago. Failed history in year 11, so yeah, who's laughing now, Mr. Wakeham? Here I am, bloody published author. He did his best, but it was what did he call my work back then? He called it a series of unjustified generalizations. So here we are, 20 years later, nothing has changed, mate. I'm still doing exactly the same thing. But no, look, I've always loved history. I studied at university, realised very quickly that it wasn't going to lead anywhere in terms of employability, so got my dip ed and became a teacher. But I still kept reading and doing stuff with history, and then put out this podcast just as a little hobby. I've been lucky enough that over the years it's sort of taken off. People listen all around the world now. Books come out. It's something I never really thought would happen, but here we are. It's been a hell of a journey. I hope it's nowhere near finished, because I love doing this. My main thing here is, like, history has this reputation for being boring, right? It's all facts and figures and names and dates and times and places. But what history really is, and I'd say this a lot, history is just a collection of the stories that we have decided are worth remembering, right? It's a collection of the stories that we consider important enough to pass on through the generations. And when you think about how important stories are to us, I talked before about myths and legends, but like parents all around the world, you read a story to your kid when you're going to bed. We tell our friends and family stories, whether it's something funny that happened to us today or, an anecdote from years ago. Stories are what is a huge part of what gives us our shared culture, our shared society. Our humanity is based on these stories. And there's an element to history that is so staid and boring and academic and dusty and scholastic. And the podcast in this book really is just trying to undo some of that and just be funny and silly and lighthearted and remind people that history doesn't necessarily have to be boring and dull. So
Well, you have certainly achieved that with this book. It is called History's Strangest. It is out now. I encourage everyone to go and buy a copy because it's not only interesting but also so very, very funny. Riley Knight, thanks so much for chatting to news.com.au.
Mate, thanks for having me once again.
Follow or subscribe to From the Newsroom wherever you get your podcasts.